The blood trail led straight to the waterfall, just like in the dream. Alara Vance stood at the edge of the forest, her breath visible in the frozen air, her hands trembling, not from cold, but from the impossible choice before her. She'd seen this moment 3 nights in a row. A dying man beneath rushing water, a voice demanding she act. Now it was real. The forest was forbidden. The night was deadly. And she was alone. But she'd already lost everything once. What was left to fear? She stepped into the dark. If you're ready to see what happens when a woman with nothing left to lose becomes the last hope for a fallen king, stay until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. This is a story you won't forget. The cabin smelled like smoke and silence. Alara Vance had chosen both deliberately. Smoke from the fire she kept burning day and night, warding off the mountain cold. Silence because words had betrayed her, people had betrayed her, and the world itself had proven it had nothing left to say that she wanted to hear. She stood at the single window, watching snow begin to fall over the pines. Her reflection stared back. A woman of 27 who looked older, her dark hair pulled into a severe braid, her gray eyes empty of the light they'd once held. She barely recognized herself anymore. That was fine. The woman she'd been was dead anyway. 6 months ago, she'd been Alara Vance, celebrated architect in the capital city of Ardenfall, engaged to Marcus Holden, the son of the city's wealthiest merchant family. She'd been days away from a wedding that would unite 2 powerful families. She'd been admired, envied, loved, or so she'd thought. Then came the night before the rehearsal dinner. She'd arrived home early from a site inspection to find Marcus in her own bed, tangled in sheets with her sister Celeste. Not a moment of weakness, not a drunken mistake. When Alara stood frozen in the doorway, Celeste had looked up with cold satisfaction. "He was always supposed to be mine," her sister had said. "You just got in the way." Marcus hadn't even had the decency to look ashamed. "You're brilliant, Alara, but you're exhausting. Celeste understands what it means to be part of a family like ours. You never did." The wedding was canceled. The whispers started immediately. Within a week, her own parents, ambitious social climbers who'd pushed for the match, sided with Celeste. "She's younger," her mother had said. "She has time to recover from scandal. You've always been difficult, Alara. Perhaps this is for the best." Her father had been more direct. "The Holdens prefer Celeste. We won't lose their patronage over your pride." She'd been erased from her own family like a mistake in a ledger. The architectural firm where she'd been rising quickly suddenly found reasons to pass her over for projects. Invitations stopped. Friends became strangers. The city that had once felt like home became a cage of humiliation. So she'd left. The cabin had belonged to her maternal grandmother, a woman her mother had been ashamed of, a forest herbalist who'd lived alone by choice, not circumstance. Alara had loved her fiercely as a child. When the old woman died, she'd left the cabin to Alara in a will that bypassed her daughter entirely. Now it was sanctuary. The cabin sat 3 hours' hike from the nearest road, deep in the thornwood forest, a sprawling wilderness known for its beauty and its danger. Few people ventured this far. Those who did rarely came back unchanged, or at all. The forest had a reputation for swallowing the unprepared. Alara had arrived with supplies, books, and a single goal: to stop feeling anything at all. For months, she succeeded. She chopped wood until her hands blistered, then calloused. She learned to hunt small game, forage edible plants, purify water from the creek that ran behind the cabin. She read by firelight and slept without dreams. She spoke to no one. The silence became her armor. But 3 nights ago, the dreams started. The first night, she'd seen a waterfall, massive, roaring, unfamiliar. At its base, a man lay broken in the shallow pool, his body half submerged. Blood darkened the water around him. His face was turned away, but she could see he was dying. A voice, low, urgent, impossible to place, had spoken directly into her mind. "He needs you. Go." She'd woken gasping, heart hammering, and dismissed it as stress or isolation playing tricks on her mind. The second night, the dream returned. Same waterfall, same dying man, but in this time she could see more. The arrow buried in his shoulder, the deep gash across his ribs, the way his chest barely rose with breath. The voice came again. You are the only one who can reach him. Go now. She'd woken angry. She didn't want to be needed. She didn't want to save anyone. The third night, the dream was so vivid it felt real. She could hear the roar of the water, smell the iron tang of blood, feel the cold spray on her skin. The man turned his head just slightly, and she caught a glimpse of his face. Strong features, a scar along his jaw, eyes that even in near death held command. The voice was no longer a whisper, it was a demand. If you do not go, he dies. If he dies, thousands die with him. Choose. Alara had woken before dawn, shaking with fury and fear. She didn't want this. She didn't want to be chosen for anything, to matter to anyone, to risk herself for a stranger. But the image wouldn't leave her mind. And beneath the anger, something else stirred, something she'd thought was dead. Curiosity, purpose. The faint, stubborn ember of the woman she used to be, the one who solved impossible problems and refused to back down from a challenge. She'd tried to ignore it. She'd spent the day splitting firewood with vicious focus, trying to exhaust herself into indifference. It hadn't worked. Now it was dusk. Snow was falling, and Alara stood at the window, staring into the forest, knowing exactly what she was about to do and hating herself for it. "This is insane," she said aloud, her voice rough from disuse, but she was already pulling on her heaviest coat, lacing her boots, filling a pack with supplies, rope, a knife, her grandmother's medical kit, a flask of whiskey, a blanket. She moved with the precision of someone who'd spent months surviving alone, checking and rechecking each item. The waterfall from her dream wasn't marked on any map she owned, but she knew the thornwood well enough by now to guess. There was only one falls within a day's travel that matched the scales she'd seen. Widow's Drop, a place even local hunters avoided. The cliffs were unstable. The currents were deadly. The forest around it was a maze of ravines and rockfalls. Going there at night, in snow, alone, it was borderline suicidal. Alara shouldered the pack, picked up a lantern, and walked out into the cold. The forest at night was a different world. The snow muffled sound, turning the wilderness into a cathedral of silence. Her lantern cast wild shadows through the trees, making the path uncertain. Every crack of a branch, every whisper of wind felt amplified. She knew the dangers: wolves, cold, cliffs hidden by darkness. She kept moving anyway. The dream pulled her forward like a rope around her ribs. She followed the creek upstream, using it as a guide. The terrain grew rougher. The trees thinned. The sound of rushing water began to echo through the rocks. 2 hours into the hike, she heard the falls. The roar was immense, shaking the air itself. She climbed over a rise of stone and froze. There it was. Widow's Drop. The waterfall plunged from a cliff 60 feet high, crashing into a wide pool below before spilling into the creek. Mist hung in the air like a ghost. The cliffs on either side were jagged and black, slick with ice. And at the base of the falls, exactly where the dream had shown her, a man lay motionless in the shallows. Alara's breath caught. It was real. All of it. She scrambled down the slope, slipping on wet stone, her lantern swinging wildly. She reached the pool's edge and waded in, gasping at the cold. The water was knee-deep, numbing. The man was massive, easily 6.5 feet tall, broad-shouldered, built like a soldier. He lay on his side, half in and half out of the water. Blood stained his torn shirt. An arrow jutted from his left shoulder. A deep gash ran along his ribs. His face was pale, his lips blue, but his chest moved, barely. "Hey," Alara said sharply, gripping his shoulder. "Can you hear me?" No response. She pressed fingers to his neck. His pulse was there, thready, weak, but there. Hypothermia was setting in. Blood loss, trauma, exposure. He was dying by degrees. Alara's mind shifted into the mode she'd honed as an architect. Assess, prioritize, solve. First, get him out of the water. She grabbed him under the arms and pulled. He didn't budge. He weighed at least 220 pounds, maybe more. Soaked and unconscious, he was dead weight. "Come on," she hissed, planting her feet and heaving. Inch by inch, she dragged him toward the bank. Her muscles screamed. Her boots slipped. She fell twice, the cold water soaking through her coat, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Finally, she hauled him onto a flat section of rock just beyond the pool's edge, out of the water but still exposed. Alara collapsed beside him, gasping. her body shaking from exertion and cold. She forced herself upright and assessed him by lantern light. The arrow had to come out, but not here. Moving him with it still embedded would cause more damage. The gash along his ribs was deep, but not actively spurting. No major artery hit. His core temperature was the immediate crisis. She stripped off his soaked shirt, revealing more scars beneath, old wounds, evidence of a violent life. She wrapped him in the blanket from her pack, then her own coat, sacrificing warmth for his survival. "Who the hell are you?" she muttered, studying his face. Even unconscious, he looked dangerous. The scar along his jaw, the hard lines of his features, the calluses on his hands. This was a man who'd lived by violence. A sound echoed through the canyon, voices, distant but growing closer. Alara's head snapped up. Torchlight flickered on the cliffs above. "Find him!" a man's voice shouted. "He can't have gone far." "Check the falls," another answered. Her stomach dropped. Whoever had done this to him was still hunting, and if they found her with him, she was dead too. Alara looked down at the unconscious man, then at the cliffs, calculating. She couldn't outrun them, couldn't hide him, couldn't fight, but she could move. She grabbed the man under the arms again and began dragging him toward the tree line, away from the falls, into the deeper shadows of the forest. Every foot was agony. Her legs burned. Her lungs ached. The voices grew louder. She pulled him behind a massive fallen log, then collapsed beside him, pressing a hand over his mouth in case he woke and made noise. Her other hand gripped the knife from her belt. Torchlight spilled down the slope. 3 men emerged at the pool's edge, armed with swords and crossbows. They wore matching dark leather armor, mercenaries maybe, or soldiers without insignia. "There's blood here," one said, crouching by the water. "Fresh." "He's dead," another said flatly. "No one survives that fall in the cold." "We don't report back until we have a body," the first snapped. "Spread out. Check downstream." They moved along the bank, their light sweeping the rocks. Alara held perfectly still, her heart hammering so hard she was sure they'd hear it. The man beside her didn't stir. One of the soldiers stopped 10 feet from the log. He turned slowly, scanning the trees. Alara's grip tightened on the knife. If he came closer, she'd have to fight. She'd never killed anyone. Didn't know if she could. The soldier took a step forward. Then another shout echoed from farther downstream. "Movement! This way!" The soldier turned and ran toward the voice. Alara didn't move for a full minute after they disappeared. When she finally exhaled, her whole body shook. She looked down at the man. "You'd better be worth this." It took her 4 hours to get him back to the cabin. She fashioned a crude travois from branches and rope, dragging him through the forest like a sled. Her shoulders screamed, her hands blistered and bled. She fell a dozen times, but she didn't stop. By the time she hauled him through the cabin door, dawn was breaking and she could barely stand. She pulled him onto the rug in front of the fire, added wood to the embers until flames roared, then collapsed against the wall to catch her breath. The man still hadn't woken. Alara forced herself upright and got to work. She boiled water, sterilized her grandmother's tools, and laid out supplies. Then she knelt beside him and examined the arrow. It was a hunting broadhead, buried deep. Removing it wrong would shred muscle and artery. She'd watched her grandmother treat injuries as a child, absorbed more than she'd realized. Her hands were steady as she cut away the shaft, then carefully, incrementally, worked the head free. Blood welled. She packed the wound, stitched it closed, wrapped it tight. The gash along his ribs required 23 stitches. She worked by firelight and focus, her exhaustion held at bay by sheer will. When she finally finished, the sun was fully up. The man's breathing was steadier. His color was less deathly. Alara cleaned the blood from her hands, then sat by the fire and stared at him. "Who are you?" she whispered. He didn't answer. She stayed awake as long as she could, watching him for signs of fever or shock. But eventually, exhaustion won. She slumped against the wall and fell into deep, dreamless sleep. She woke to the sound of movement. Alara's eyes snapped open. The man was sitting up, or trying to. He'd made it to one elbow, his face twisted in pain, his free hand pressed to the bandage on his shoulder. "Don't," she said sharply, scrambling to her feet. "You'll tear the stitches." His head turned toward her. His eyes were pale gray, sharp despite the pain, and they locked onto her with startling intensity. "Who are you?" His voice was a rasp, rough from disuse and trauma. "The person who saved your life," Ilara said. "Lie back down." He didn't move. "Where am I?" "My cabin. Thornwood Forest. You were dying at Widow's Drop. I brought you here." His gaze swept the room, assessing, calculating, looking for threats. Then it returned to her. "Alone?" he asked. "Yes." "Why?" The question was so blunt it caught her off guard. "Does it matter?" she said. "Yes." Ilara crossed her arms. "I had a dream that told me to, 3 nights in a row, so I went. That's all you need to know." Something shifted in his expression, surprise maybe, or recognition, but he said nothing. "Who's hunting you?" she asked. "And don't lie. They almost found us." He was silent for a long moment. Then, "People who want me dead." "Obviously. Who are you?" "Someone who shouldn't be alive." Ilara's patience snapped. "I dragged your enormous unconscious body through miles of forest in the middle of the night, stitched you back together and hid you from armed soldiers. You owe me more than cryptic answers." The faintest hint of a smile touched his mouth. "Fair." He shifted, wincing, then met her eyes fully. "My name is Kyle Thornridge, and if the men hunting me find this place, they'll kill us both." The name meant nothing to her, but the weight in his voice, the command even in weakness, it told her enough. "Then we'd better make sure they don't," Ilara said. And for the first time in 6 months, she felt something she'd thought was gone forever. Purpose. Kyle Thornridge didn't sleep that first night. Ilara could feel him watching her from across the room, his breathing steady but alert, his body coiled despite the injuries. She'd given him the bed, partly out of practicality, partly because she refused to turn her back on a stranger who could probably kill her with one hand, even half dead. She sat by the fire, her grandmother's hunting knife within reach, and pretended to read while keeping him in her peripheral vision. By dawn, the tension had become almost unbearable. "You're afraid of me," Kale said finally, his voice cutting through the silence. Ilara didn't look up from her book. "I'm cautious. There's a difference. You saved my life. Then you brought me to your home. But you won't sleep, because I don't know you." "Fair." He shifted slightly, testing his range of motion. "What do you want to know?" "Why those men want you dead." Kale was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made her finally look at him. "Because I was supposed to die 3 weeks ago. Because I know who betrayed me. And because if I live long enough to reach the capital, a lot of powerful people lose everything." Ilara closed the book. "That's not an answer. That's a threat wrapped in mystery." A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. "You don't scare easily, do you?" "Not anymore." She met his gaze directly. "I've already lost everything worth losing, so answer the question or get out of my house." The smile faded. He studied her with those pale gray eyes, and she had the unsettling sense of being measured against some invisible standard. "My name is Kale Thornridge," he said slowly. "I was the Lord Commander of the Eastern Provinces, sworn to the High Council of Valdris. 3 weeks ago, I was ambushed by my own men during a treaty negotiation at the border. Someone on the council paid them to make it look like enemy raiders killed me. They left me for dead in a ravine." Ilara's stomach tightened. Valdris, the kingdom that borders the Thornwood. Yes. She'd heard of Valdris. Everyone had. It was a fractured realm, divided by internal politics, plagued by border disputes and assassination attempts that made the capital a nest of vipers. She'd deliberately chosen a cabin as far from that chaos as possible. "So you're a soldier," she said. "I'm a lord," Kale corrected quietly. "The Thornridge family has held the Eastern Command for 3 generations. We're sworn to protect the realm. I've fought in 12 campaigns, negotiated 4 treaties, and held the border against invasion for 7 years. His jaw tightened. "And someone on the council decided I was too dangerous to let live." "Why?" "Because I discovered something I wasn't supposed to know. Evidence of treason. A plot to collapse the Eastern defense and let enemy forces through in exchange for gold and territory." His voice went cold. "The people behind it sit in positions of power. They can't allow me to expose them." Ilara absorbed this, her mind already cataloging the implications. And the men at the waterfall? Hired blades. The council's paying well. They'll keep hunting until they find proof I'm dead. He leaned forward slightly, wincing at the movement. Which means staying here puts you in danger. If they trace me to this cabin, they'll kill me, Alara finished flatly. I know. I was there, remember? Then why did you save me? The question hung in the air like smoke. Alara thought about the dream. The voice. The 3 nights of being called to action despite every instinct screaming at her to stay hidden and safe. She thought about the person she used to be, the woman who solved impossible problems, who didn't back down from challenges, who believed her actions mattered. Because someone needed to, she said simply, and I was the only one there. Cale held her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded, as if she'd passed some test. Then we need to prepare, he said, because they will come. Over the next 3 days, the cabin transformed into something between a war room and a fortress. Kyle recovered faster than should have been possible. By the 2nd day, he was on his feet, moving stiffly but with purpose. By the 3rd, he was helping Alara reinforce the cabin's defenses with a precision that spoke of years of military training. They barricaded the windows from the inside, leaving narrow gaps to see and shoot through. They set tripwires in the forest around the clearing, tied to bells that would sound if anyone approached. They inventoried weapons, Alara's hunting bow, her knives, Kyle's sword that she'd found strapped to his body beneath the blood-soaked clothes. You know how to use this? Kale asked, holding up the bow. I've killed deer, Alara said. Never people. It's the same principle. Aim for center mass. Don't hesitate. He demonstrated the grip, the draw, the release. His hands were scarred and steady. Hesitation gets you killed. Comforting, she muttered, but she practiced until her shoulders ached. They worked in stretches of tense silence, broken by brief exchanges that slowly revealed pieces of who they were. She learned that Kyle had been a soldier since 16 when his father died defending the eastern border and left him the command. That he'd never married because war didn't leave room for anything else. That he spoke 4 languages and could read terrain like a book, but had never lived anywhere that felt like home. He learned that she'd been an architect, that she'd designed buildings meant to last centuries, that she'd been betrayed by everyone she loved and had chosen the forest because it was the one place where expectations couldn't follow. You're angry, Kale observed one evening as they ate a sparse dinner of dried meat and flatbread. Alara looked up sharply. What? At the world. At the people who hurt you. You're angry, and you think if you bury yourself out here long enough, it'll go away. She bristled. You don't know me. I know anger, he said quietly. I've lived with it for years. It's useful in a fight, but it'll eat you alive if you let it. Then what am I supposed to do? The words came out sharper than she intended. Forgive them? Pretend it didn't happen? No, use it. Transform it. Anger that sits still is poison. Anger that moves becomes power. Alara stared at him, something shifting in her chest. Is that what you did? I tried. His expression darkened, but I let the wrong people get too close. Trusted when I should have verified. And it cost me everything. He met her eyes. Don't make that mistake. The warning was clear, but so was something else. A recognition between 2 people who'd been broken by betrayal and were still figuring out how to function with the pieces. On the 4th day, the bells rang. Alara was outside gathering firewood when the sharp metallic sound cut through the morning air. She dropped the logs and ran for the cabin, her heart hammering. Kyle was already at the window, sword in hand, his body tense. How many? She asked, grabbing her bow. Can't tell yet. At least 3. He pointed toward the tree line. There, moving slow, searching. Alara knocked an arrow and moved to the opposite window. Through the gap in the boards, she could see movement, dark shapes filtering through the pines, fanning out in a tactical pattern. They're trained, Kale said grimly. Not just hired muscle. Someone sent professionals. Can we run? Not without being seen, and they'll run us down in open forest. He glanced at her. We hold here. Make them pay for every inch. The shapes drew closer. 5 men, all armed, all moving with the coordinated precision of soldiers. They wore dark cloaks over leather armor, faces shadowed. One of them stopped at the edge of the clearing, studying the cabin. He He raised a hand, signaling the others to spread out. Alara's hands were slick with sweat on the bowstring. The lead man took a step into the clearing. "Lord Commander Thornridge," he called out, his voice carrying across the space. "We know you're in there. Come out, and the woman lives." Kale's expression went ice cold. "Liars." "You have my word," the man continued. "She's not part of this. Let her go, and we'll finish what we came for." "Don't," Alara hissed. "Don't you dare." Kyle didn't move. "I know you, Corvin. I trained you, promoted you, and you put an arrow in my back for gold." His voice rang with controlled fury. "Your word means nothing." The man, Corvin, sighed. "Then you've made your choice." He gestured. The soldiers advanced. "Wait for my mark," Kyle said quietly. "We take the flankers first. They're the real threat." Alara's pulse roared in her ears. The soldiers crossed the clearing in a loose formation, 2 heading for the door, 2 circling toward the sides, 1 hanging back with a crossbow. "Now," Kyle said. Alara released. The arrow flew true, catching the soldier on the left in the shoulder. He went down with a shout. Kale smashed through the window boards and rolled into the clearing, sword flashing. He came up inside the reach of the nearest soldier and drove the blade through his guard in one brutal motion. Chaos erupted. Alara fired again, missed, reloaded with shaking hands. The crossbowman swung toward her. She dropped below the window as a bolt shattered the wood inches from her head. Outside, Kyle fought like something out of a nightmare. Fast, vicious, controlled. He moved through the soldiers with lethal efficiency, every strike purposeful. But he was still injured, still slowed. One of the men caught him across the ribs with a mace. Kyle grunted, stumbled. Alara didn't think. She grabbed her knife, kicked open the door, and ran. The crossbowman saw her coming. He swung the weapon toward her. She hurled the knife. It wasn't a clean throw, but it hit him in the chest hard enough to make him stagger. She crashed into him, driving him backward, clawing for the crossbow. They hit the ground together. He was bigger, stronger, trained. But Alara fought with the desperate fury of someone who'd already decided she wasn't going to be a victim again. She got her hands on the crossbow, jerked it up, and fired point blank. The bolt punched through his throat. He went still. Alara rolled off him, gasping, her hands covered in blood. She looked up to see Kyle finishing the last soldier with a brutal efficiency that left no room for mercy. Then silence. The clearing was a wreck of bodies and blood. Kyle stood in the center, breathing hard, his shoulder wound bleeding again through the bandage. Alara staggered to her feet. "Are you?" "I'm fine." He wiped his sword on a dead man's cloak, his face grim. "But there'll be more. Corvin was a squad leader. When he doesn't report back, they'll send a full unit." "How long do we have?" "A day. Maybe 2. He looked at the cabin, then at her. "We can't stay here." Alara's chest tightened. This place had been her sanctuary, her escape. The thought of leaving it felt like losing the last piece of safety she had left. But Kyle was right. Staying meant dying. "Where do we go?" she asked. "The capital, Valdris. I need to reach the High Council chamber before the people hunting me consolidate power. If I can present the evidence I have, expose the traitors—" "They'll kill you the moment you set foot in the city," Alara interrupted. "You said it yourself. They control soldiers, resources, probably half the council." "Yes." "Then it's suicide." "Probably." Kyle met her eyes. "But it's the only chance I have to stop them. If I don't, if they succeed, thousands die. The eastern border collapses. Enemy forces pour through. The entire realm burns." Alara wanted to scream at him. Wanted to tell him it wasn't her problem, that she'd already done more than anyone could expect, that she didn't owe the world anything. But she looked at the bodies in the clearing, at the blood on her hands, at the man standing in front of her who'd spent his life holding back chaos so people like her, people who built things, created things, could live in peace. "You're asking me to walk into a war," she said. "I'm asking you to survive it with me," Kyle said. "You're smart, resourceful, and you don't quit when things get hard. I need that. I need you." No one had said those words to her in 6 months. No one had looked at her like she mattered. Alara closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the choice settle over her like a cloak. She could stay. Hide. Hope the next wave of soldiers didn't find the cabin. Live alone until the forest swallowed her completely. Or she could step into the fire one more time, risk everything, become part of something bigger than her own pain. She opened her eyes. "We leave at dawn," she said. "And if we're doing this, we do it smart. No rushing in blind. We plan, we prepare. We don't trust anyone." Kale's expression shifted, something that might have been relief or respect or both. "Agreed," he said. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Alara packed light, dried food, medical supplies, her grandmother's journals filled with herbal knowledge, a single change of clothes. Kale salvaged what he could from the dead soldiers, weapons, armor, maps. One of the bodies carried a sealed letter. Kale opened it, read in silence, then handed it to Alara. It was a kill order, official, stamped with the seal of the High Council. Lord Commander Kyle Thornridge is declared a traitor to the realm. Eliminate on sight. Confirm death. No witnesses. Beneath it, a signature. Counselor Darius Blackthorn. Blackthorn, Alara said. "I've heard that name. He controls the trade guilds and half the city guard. He's been on the council for 20 years. Untouchable." Kale's voice was flat. "He's also the one I have evidence against. He's selling border positions to enemy commanders. He's the Arat at the center." "Then he'll see you coming." "He already has." Kale folded the letter, "which is why we don't go through the front door." That night, they burned the cabin. It wasn't sentiment, it was strategy. If soldiers came looking and found the cabin intact, they'd search it, find traces, track them. But if they found ash and ruin, they'd assume Kyle had died here, maybe caught in a fight that went wrong. Alara stood in the clearing and watched the flames consume the only safe place she'd known in months. The walls crackled and collapsed. The roof fell inward with a roar of sparks. "You don't have to do this," Kyle said quietly beside her. "Yes, I do," Alara said. "Because if I stay hidden forever, they win. My sister, my family, everyone who threw me away, they win. And I'm done letting people make me feel small." Kyle nodded. "Then we go forward." "We go forward," Alara agreed. The flames burned through the night. By dawn, only embers remained. They left the forest as the sun broke through the trees, two figures moving fast and silent through terrain most would consider impassable. Kyle led, his injuries forgotten or ignored. Alara followed, her architect's mind already mapping the route, calculating distances, identifying risks. The Thornwood Forest gave way to foothills. The foothills gave way to roads, and roads led to Valdris, a city of stone and secrets, where power was currency and betrayal was politics. Alara had walked away from civilization to escape its cruelty. Now she was walking straight back into the heart of it, but this time she wasn't running. This time she was choosing the fight. On the second day of travel, they reached a small village at the forest's edge, a cluster of wooden buildings surrounding a well, the kind of place that existed primarily to service traders moving between the capital and the border territories. "We need supplies," Kyle said, "and information. Stay close. Don't draw attention." They entered the village in late afternoon, keeping their hoods up, their weapons hidden. The streets were quiet, but not empty. Alara felt eyes on them immediately, the suspicious gazes of people who knew strangers meant trouble. Kyle led her to a tavern, a low building with a crooked sign and smoke seeping through the roof. Inside it smelled like old ale and older secrets. A dozen patrons sat scattered at tables, most of them rough-looking men who made their living on the road. Kyle approached the bar. The keeper, a broad woman with iron-gray hair, looked him up and down, her expression unreadable. "We need food, water, and news," Kyle said, sliding coins across the counter. "In that order." The woman pocketed the coins without comment. "Food's stew, water's clean, news depends on what you're asking." "What's happening in the capital?" The woman's eyes narrowed. "Why do you care?" "Because I'm heading there." "Then you're a fool." She ladled stew into 2 bowls and set them down hard. "City's on edge, council's fighting itself. Trade routes are closing, people are scared." "Scared of what?" Alara asked. The woman looked at her for the first time. "Rumor is the Lord Commander of the Eastern Provinces was assassinated. No one's saying who did it, but the border's falling apart. Raiders hit 3 villages last week. No one's protecting us anymore." Alara glanced at Kyle. His face was stone. "What else?" he asked. "Counselor Blackthorn's offering gold for information on anyone associated with the Thornridge family. Soldiers are questioning people on the roads. Checkpoints everywhere." The woman leaned closer, her voice dropping. "If you're smart, you'll turn around and go back where you came from. The capital's a death trap right now." "Noted," Kyle said. He took the bowls and led Alara to a corner table. They ate in silence, the stew tasteless but filling. Around them, the tavern's conversations buzzed low. Talk of missing caravans, soldiers asking questions, villages abandoned overnight. "She's right," Alara said quietly. "This is insane." "Yes," KL agreed. "We're walking into a city controlled by the man who wants you dead, with no allies, no plan, and no guarantee we'll survive the first hour." "Also yes," Alara set down her spoon. "Then we need to change the approach. We can't just walk through the front gate and hope for the best." "What do you suggest?" She thought for a moment, her mind turning over the problem like an architectural puzzle. "Blackthorn controls the official channels, guards, gates, council chambers. So we don't use official channels. We go under." Kale raised an eyebrow. "Under?" "Every city has infrastructure, sewers, tunnels, supply routes. I've designed municipal systems. I know how they work." She leaned forward. "We find a way into the city that doesn't involve checkpoints. We move through spaces people don't watch, and we find someone inside who has as much reason to hate Blackthorn as you do." Kale studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled, a real smile this time, sharp and approving. "You're not just smart," he said. "You're dangerous." "I'm practical," Alara corrected. "There's a difference." "Not much of one." They finished eating and left the tavern as the sun set, slipping back into the forest to make camp away from prying eyes. That night, Kyle drew maps in the dirt by firelight. Sketches of the capital's layout, the districts, the council chamber, the eastern gate where his family's estates had once stood before being seized. "There's a man," he said, "Captain Aldrich Voss. He served under me for 5 years. If he's still alive, he'll help. Can you trust him? He pulled me out of a burning fort once. Took an arrow meant for me. I trust him as much as I trust anyone." Kyle glanced at her, which isn't saying much. "Smart," Alara said. They planned through the night, refining the approach, identifying weak points. By dawn, they had something resembling a strategy. Risky, desperate, but possible. They traveled for 2 more days, moving parallel to the main road, but staying hidden in the tree line. On the 3rd day, the forest thinned and the land opened up into farmland. And in the distance, rising against the horizon like a crown of stone, stood Valdris. The capital was massive, walls 50 feet high, towers piercing the sky, the whole city sprawling across a hillside like a sleeping beast. Smoke rose from 1,000 chimneys. Banners snapped in the wind from the ramparts. Alara had seen sketches in books, but nothing prepared her for the reality. It was beautiful and brutal at once, a city built for war and wealth in equal measure. "There," Kyle said, pointing to the southern edge. "The old aqueduct. It was decommissioned 20 years ago, but the tunnels are still there. If we can get inside, we can reach the lower districts without going through the gates," Alara finished. "And from there, we find Voss, and we start taking back what's mine." They waited until nightfall, then moved. The aqueduct entrance was overgrown with vines, half collapsed, but still passable. Alara led the way, her architect's eye picking out the safest path through the rubble. The tunnel beyond was dark and damp, the walls slick with moss. They walked for an hour in near total darkness, their footsteps echoing. The air grew thicker, tinged with the smell of the city, smoke and bodies and commerce. Finally, light appeared ahead, faint, flickering. They emerged into an old cistern beneath the lower district. Above them, through grates in the ceiling, Alara could hear the city, voices, footsteps, the clatter of carts. "We're in," Kale said. Alara looked up at the grates, at the thin slices of the city visible through them, and felt her pulse quicken. She'd run from the capital once, broken and humiliated. Now she was back, and this time she wasn't running from anything. She was running toward war. She was running toward war. The cistern opened into a network of maintenance tunnels that snaked beneath the lower district like veins beneath skin. Alara moved through them with Kyle at her side, their footsteps muffled by decades of sediment. Above them, the city thrummed with life. Wheels on cobblestones shouted arguments, the clang of smithies working late into the night. "This way," Kael murmured, taking a narrow branch to the left. "Voss runs a blacksmith shop on Iron Street. If he's still loyal, he'll hide us until we can make contact with the others." "What others?" Ilara asked. "Men who served under me. Soldiers who know what Blackthorn is." His jaw tightened. "If they're still alive." They climbed a rusted ladder that led to a grate beneath an alley. Kael pushed it open slowly, checking for threats, then pulled himself through. Ilara followed, emerging into the narrow space between two buildings. The smell hit her immediately: refuse, smoke, unwashed bodies. The lower district. Kael replaced the grate and led her into the street. Valdris at night was a different creature than it appeared from a distance. The lower district was a maze of cramped buildings leaning against each other like drunks, their walls stained with soot and age. Lanterns hung at irregular intervals, casting pools of sickly yellow light. People moved through the shadows, workers heading home, beggars huddled in doorways, street vendors packing up their stalls. No one looked at them directly, but Ilara felt the weight of attention anyway. Strangers were noticed here. Strangers were trouble. Kael kept his hood up and his hand near his sword. "Stay close. Don't make eye contact. Don't react to anything." Ilara nodded, her pulse quickening. She'd lived in cities before, but never like this. Never as someone hunted, never with violence a single wrong word away. They turned onto Iron Street, a road lined with workshops and forges, most of them shuttered for the night. Halfway down, a building stood with its doors still open, orange firelight spilling onto the street. The sound of hammer on metal rang out in steady rhythm. Kael stopped at the entrance. Inside, a man worked at an anvil, broad-shouldered, his face obscured by shadow and the glow of the forge. He wore a leather apron, his arms marked with old scars. "We're closed," the man said without looking up. "Even for old friends?" Kael asked. The hammering stopped. The man turned slowly, squinting against the light. His face was weathered, mid-40s, with a thick beard and eyes that had seen too much. Those eyes widened. "Mercy," he breathed. "Kael?" "Hello, Aldrich." Captain Aldrich Voss crossed the space in 3 strides and seized Kael in a crushing embrace. "They said you were dead. They said, everyone believes—" "I know what they believe," Kael said. "It's safer that way." Aldrich pulled back, his hands gripping Kael's shoulders, his expression torn between relief and fury. "Do you have any idea what's been happening? Blackthorn declared you a traitor. He seized your estates, disbanded your regiment, arrested anyone who questioned the story. Half your officers are in chains, the other half are in hiding or dead." Kael's face went hard. "Then we're running out of time." Aldrich finally noticed Ilara. His gaze swept over her, calculating, suspicious. "Who's this?" "Ilara Vance," Kael said. "She saved my life, twice. I trust her." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one you're getting," Ilara said flatly. "Are you going to help us or not?" Aldrich blinked, then let out a rough laugh. "She's got spine. I'll give her that." He gestured toward the back of the shop. "Come on. If anyone saw you come in here, we're all dead." He led them through the forge into a back room that doubled as living quarters, a narrow space with a cot, a table, and a small stove. He barred the door, drew the shutters, then turned to face them. "Talk," he said. "And don't leave anything out." Kael told him everything. The ambush. The betrayal. The evidence he'd gathered proving Blackthorn was selling border positions to enemy commanders in exchange for gold. The kill order. The soldiers hunting him through the forest. Ilara's intervention. Aldrich listened in silence, his expression darkening with every word. When Kael finished, Aldrich sat down heavily on the cot. "It's worse than you know." "What do you mean?" "Blackthorn's not just consolidating power. He's planning something. 3 days ago, he called an emergency session of the High Council. He's pushing for a vote to declare martial law and install himself as Lord Protector until the crisis is resolved." Aldrich looked up. "If that vote passes, he controls everything, the army, the guard, the treasury. He becomes untouchable." "When's the vote?" Kael asked. 5 days from now." Ilara's stomach dropped. "That's not enough time." "It has to be," Kael said. "If we can expose him before the vote, if we can present evidence in front of the full council. They won't let you within 100 feet of the council chamber, Aldrich interrupted. Blackthorn has the city guard on lockdown, checkpoints everywhere. Anyone even vaguely connected to the Thornridge name is being questioned. You walk into that building, you're dead before you reach the doors. Then we find another way in, Elara said. Both men looked at her. The council chamber is a building, she continued, her mind already working through the problem. It has infrastructure, service entrances, ventilation, maintenance corridors. There's always a way in if you know how to look. You're talking about breaking into the most heavily guarded building in the capital, Aldrich said. Yes. That's insane. It's necessary, Elara corrected. Unless you have a better idea. Aldrich looked at Kyle. Where did you find her? Dying in the woods, Kyle said. Best decision I never made. Despite the tension, Aldrich smiled. Then his expression sobered. Even if you get inside, you'll need proof, real proof. Documents, witnesses, something undeniable. I have documents, Kyle said. Correspondence between Blackthorn and enemy commanders. Payment records. Troop movements that match enemy raids perfectly. I hid them before the ambush. Where? The old garrison. East side. There's a loose stone in the command office fireplace. Everything's behind it. Aldrich swore. The garrison's been converted into a barracks for Blackthorn's personal guard. It's locked down tighter than the council chamber. Then we get creative, Elara said. We split up. One team retrieves the documents. The other prepares the breach into the council chamber. We coordinate, we move fast, and we don't give them time to react. Kale studied her. You've done this before. I've managed construction projects with 50 variables and a dozen contractors all trying to cut corners. This is just problem solving with higher stakes. She met his gaze. The question is whether you're willing to trust me. I already do, Kyle said simply. Aldrich shook his head. You're both insane, but if we're doing this, we'll need help. I know 3 men from your old unit who are still in the city. Good soldiers, loyal. They'll fight. Get them, Kale said. We meet tomorrow night. Plan everything. Execute the day before the vote. That's 4 days to pull off the impossible, Aldrich said. Then we'd better not waste time, Elara replied. They spent the night in Aldrich's back room, taking shifts on watch while the city slept around them. Elara lay on the floor, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing through plans and contingencies. Beside her, Kyle's breathing was steady, but not relaxed. She could feel the tension radiating off him, the coiled energy of a man preparing for war. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. You could walk away, find another cabin, disappear. We've had this conversation, Elara said. I know. But once we start this, there's no going back. If we fail, Blackthorn will hunt you for the rest of your life. Elara turned her head to look at him. In the dim light, his face was all hard angles and shadows. And if we succeed, then we change everything. Good, she said. I'm tired of things staying the same. The next day, Aldrich brought the men. They arrived separately, filtering into the forge one at a time to avoid suspicion. 3 soldiers, or former soldiers, each carrying the weight of campaigns in their posture and scars. The first was Marcus Trell, a wiry man with sharp eyes and a crossbow slung across his back. He'd been a scout in Kyle's regiment, the kind who could move through enemy territory without leaving a trace. The second was Gareth Stone, built like a wall, his hands scarred from years of sword work. He'd served as Kyle's sergeant, the man who kept order when things went sideways. The third was a woman, Lysa Cade, younger than the others, with short, cropped dark hair and the cold, assessing gaze of someone who'd killed often enough to stop counting. She'd been an infiltration specialist, the person sent into enemy camps to gather intelligence or eliminate targets. They all looked at Kyle like he'd returned from the dead. Sir, Gareth said, his voice rough with emotion. We thought. I know what you thought, Kale said. I'm sorry, but I need you now. One last mission, the most important one. He laid out the plan. The documents in the garrison, the breach into the council chamber, the timing that had to be perfect down to the minute, the risks that were nearly insurmountable. When he finished, silence filled the room. Then Marcus grinned. Sounds like old times. Worse than old times, Lysa corrected. But I'm in. Always in, Gareth said. They spent the next 2 days preparing. Elara drew maps of the council chamber based on public architectural records she found in Aldrich's collection of city documents. She identified 3 potential entry points: a maintenance corridor beneath the main hall, a ventilation shaft in the east wing, and a servant's entrance that connected to the kitchens. Lisa scouted each location, reporting back with guard rotations, lock types, and patrol patterns. Marcus surveilled the garrison, mapping out when shifts changed and where the documents would be. Cale and Gareth gathered weapons, armor, anything that might tip the scales when violence inevitably erupted. Elara worked with a focus that surprised even herself. This was what she'd been trained for: solving impossible problems, coordinating moving pieces, finding the path through chaos. The architecture was different, but the principles were the same. On the 3rd night, they finalized the plan. "We move in 2 teams, Kyle said, pointing to Elara's map. Team 1, Marcus, Gareth, and I, hit the garrison at midnight. We retrieve the documents and fall back to the rendezvous point here." He marked a spot near the docks. Team 2, Lysa, Elara, and Aldrich, breach the council chamber through the maintenance corridor and secure the route to the main hall. We meet at first light, combine forces, and make the presentation when the council convenes at dawn. "What about Blackthorn's guards?" Aldrich asked. "We go through them if we have to," Kael said flatly. "But ideally, we're in and out before they know we're there." "And if it goes wrong?" Lysa asked. Kael met each of their eyes in turn. "Then we make sure the documents reach the council anyway, even if we don't." The weight of that settled over the room. Elara felt her pulse quicken. This was real. In less than 24 hours, they'd either change the course of a kingdom or die trying. "Get some rest," Kael said. "Tomorrow, everything changes." The next night, Elara stood in the maintenance corridor beneath the council chamber, her heart hammering so hard she was sure Lysa and Aldrich could hear it. The corridor was narrow, damp, lit only by the lantern Aldrich carried. The walls were stone, the air thick with the smell of mildew. Above them, the council chamber sat dark and silent, waiting for dawn. "Locks ahead," Lysa whispered, moving forward. She knelt by an iron gate, her picks working with practiced efficiency. Within seconds, the lock clicked open. They moved through. The corridor branched. Elara consulted her map, tracing the route with her finger. "Left here, then up 2 levels. That'll put us in the servants' hall, adjacent to the main chamber." They climbed in silence, every sound amplified by the enclosed space. Elara's hands were slick with sweat. She kept thinking about Kael, Marcus, and Gareth at the garrison, kept hoping they'd made it in and out without incident. They reached the servants' hall, a narrow passage lined with doors leading to storage rooms and kitchens. Lisa checked each door, ensuring they were alone. "Clear," she said. "We hold here until dawn." They settled in to wait. Minutes stretched into hours. Elara sat with her back against the wall, her knife in her lap, listening to the city wake around them. Footsteps above. Voices. The clatter of preparation as the council chamber came to life. Aldrich checked his weapons for the 100th time. Lisa sat motionless, her eyes half closed, conserving energy. Elara's mind wouldn't stop racing. What if Kael didn't make it? What if the documents were gone? What if Blackthorn had anticipated this? A soft knock echoed through the corridor. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps. The signal. Aldrich moved to the door and opened it a crack. Kael slipped through, followed by Marcus and Gareth. All 3 were alive, but Gareth had blood on his shoulder and Marcus was limping. "Did you get them?" Elara asked. Kael held up a leather satchel. "Every document, every piece of evidence." His expression was grim. "But it cost us. The garrison was more heavily guarded than we expected. We had to fight our way out. They know we're here." "How long do we have?" Lisa asked. "Minutes, maybe less. Blackthorn will lock down the chamber the moment he hears." Kael looked at Elara. "We move now, or we lose the chance." Elara's heart hammered. This was it. No more planning, no more preparation. "Then let's move," she said. They burst into the council chamber through the servants' entrance just as the session was beginning. The chamber was a vast circular room with tiered seating rising toward a domed ceiling. 12 council members sat in high-backed chairs arranged in a semicircle, their robes marking their positions: trade, military, agriculture, law. At the center, elevated above the others, sat Counselor Darius Blackthorne. He was a tall man, silver-haired, with the kind of face that inspired confidence. Strong jaw, clear eyes, a voice that commanded rooms. He looked every inch the leader. He also looked utterly shocked as Cale Thornridge walked into the chamber with a sword on his hip and fury in his eyes. The room erupted. Council members shot to their feet. Guards stationed along the walls drew weapons. Blackthorne's expression shifted from shock to cold calculation in an instant. "Seize them!" he shouted. "Lord Thornridge is a traitor to the realm. He is not permitted—" "I am a lord of this realm." Cale's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "I have the right to address this council, and I have evidence of treason that will change everything you believe." "You have no rights," Blackthorne said. "You were declared a traitor by unanimous vote. Your lands are forfeit. Your title is revoked. You are nothing." "Then let me be nothing in front of witnesses," Kyle said. He raised the satchel. "I have proof that you, Counselor Blackthorne, have been selling border positions to enemy commanders. I have correspondence in your own hand, payment records, troop movements that directly led to the deaths of soldiers and civilians. You are the traitor, not me." Blackthorne's face went white with rage. "Lies. He is desperate. He has fabricated." "Then let the council see," Kyle said. He strode forward and dumped the contents of the satchel onto the central table. Documents scattered across the polished wood, letters, ledgers, maps marked with troop positions and gold amounts. The council members leaned forward, their expressions shifting from anger to confusion to horror as they read. "This is dated 4 months ago," one of them said, holding up a letter. "This is Blackthorne's seal." "Forgeries," Blackthorne snapped. "He has had weeks to fabricate." "These aren't forgeries," Alara said, stepping forward. Every eye in the room turned to her. "I know documents. I've worked with contracts, plans, legal texts for years. These are real. The ink, the paper, the seal, they match official council correspondence. And the handwriting is consistent across dozens of letters. You can verify every claim here against your own records." "And who are you to speak in this chamber?" Blackthorne demanded. "Someone who has nothing to gain and everything to lose," Alara said. "I'm not part of your politics. I don't care about power or position, but I care about the truth. And the truth is that you sold out your own people for gold." The room was utterly silent. Then one of the council members, a woman in the robes of the agricultural seat, spoke. "I move to suspend the vote on martial law pending an investigation into these allegations." "Seconded," another said immediately. Blackthorne's expression twisted. "You would believe the word of a disgraced traitor and some nobody woman over mine? I have served this council for 20 years. You have been caught," Kyle said quietly. "It's over, Darius." For a moment, Blackthorne stared at him with naked hatred. Then he moved. It happened so fast that most people didn't see it. Blackthorne's hand went to his belt, pulling a concealed blade. He lunged across the table toward Kale. Alara didn't think. She threw herself sideways, crashing into Kyle and knocking him off balance. The blade meant for his throat sliced through air instead. Gareth was already moving. He caught Blackthorne's wrist mid-strike and twisted hard. The blade clattered to the floor. Blackthorne struggled, but Gareth was twice his strength and battle-trained. Within seconds, Blackthorne was on his knees, his arm wrenched behind his back. "You're done," Cale said, standing over him. Blackthorne looked up, his face contorted with rage and something else. Fear. "You have no idea what you've just destroyed. The alliances I built, the protections I secured. Without me, this realm falls apart." "Then we'll build something better," Kyle said. "Without you." The guards moved in, taking Blackthorne into custody. He didn't resist. He just stared at Kyle with cold, calculating eyes as they led him away. The council erupted into argument. Some demanded immediate investigation. Others called for Kyle's arrest. The chamber descended into chaos. Alara stood beside Kyle, her whole body shaking with adrenaline. "Is it over?" "Not even close," Kyle said, "but it's a start." One of the council members, a stern man in military robes, stood and raised his hand for silence. Slowly, the room quieted. "Lord Thornridge," he said, "these are serious allegations. If they prove true, Blackthorne will face the harshest penalties. But you have also violated protocol by entering this chamber armed and under accusation of treason. You will remain in custody until the investigation concludes. I understand, Kael said. However, the man's expression softened slightly. You will be held under house arrest, not in the dungeons, and you will have the opportunity to testify fully once we have reviewed the evidence. He looked at Alara and the others. Your companions as well. You are all under the council's protection until this matter is resolved. It wasn't freedom, but it was survival. Kael nodded. Thank you, counselor. As guards escorted them from the chamber, not roughly but firmly, Alara caught Kael's eye. We did it, she said quietly. You did it, Kael corrected. You're the reason I'm still breathing. Then we're even, Alara said. They were taken to a manor house on the edge of the upper district, a sprawling estate that had once belonged to a minor lord and now served as a holding facility for people the council wanted watched but not imprisoned. It was luxurious by most standards, but the guards at every door made it clear they weren't free to leave. For 3 days they waited while the council pored over the documents. Investigators came and went, asking questions, verifying claims, cross-referencing records. Alara answered every question with precision, her architect's mind dissecting the evidence piece by piece. On the 4th day, the council reconvened. They were brought back to the chamber, this time as witnesses, not intruders. The room was packed. News had spread. The public gallery was filled with citizens demanding answers. The lead investigator stood and read the findings. Every document was authentic, every claim verified. Blackthorn had been selling border positions for 2 years, directly leading to the deaths of over 300 soldiers and civilians. The gold had been funneled into offshore accounts. The enemy commanders he'd been dealing with had already been captured and had confirmed everything. Darius Blackthorn was guilty of high treason. The chamber erupted in outrage. The sentence was immediate. Execution within the week, all assets seized, his name stricken from the records. And then the council turned to Kael. Lord Commander Kael Thornridge, the lead counselor said, you have been cleared of all charges. Your lands, your title, and your command are hereby restored. Furthermore, in recognition of your service and the evidence you have provided, this council formally requests that you resume your position and help us rebuild what was broken. Kael stood, his face unreadable. I accept. On one condition. The council members exchanged glances. What condition? Kael turned and gestured to Alara. This woman saved my life. She risked everything to help me expose the truth. She has no title, no position, no recognition, but she has insight, intelligence, and courage that this realm desperately needs. I want her appointed as my senior advisor, with full authority. The room went silent. Alara's heart stopped. Kael, I'm not. You are, he said, cutting her off. You've already proven it. The question is whether this council is smart enough to see it. The lead counselor studied Alara for a long moment. Then he smiled. The appointment is granted. Welcome to Valdris, Lady Vance. The title landed like a thunderclap. Alara opened her mouth, closed it, looked at Kael, who was watching her with something that might have been pride. What just happened? She whispered. You became indispensable, he said. The session ended. They were released from custody. As they walked out of the council chamber into the sunlight, the crowd that had gathered outside erupted into cheers. Alara stood at the top of the steps, staring out at the sea of faces, people who moments ago had been strangers, now looking at her like she mattered. This is insane, she said. This is power, Kael corrected. And you earned it. Alara looked at him. This man she'd saved from death, this soldier who'd trusted her when no one else would. What happens now? She asked. Kael's expression hardened. Now we rebuild, and we make sure nothing like this ever happens again. But as they descended the steps, Alara caught sight of movement in the crowd, a figure watching them from the shadows, their face obscured. Her instincts screamed warning. Kael, she said quietly. He followed her gaze, saw the figure. His hand went to his sword. The figure turned and disappeared into the crowd. Who was that? Alara asked. I don't know, Kael said. But Blackthorn wasn't working alone, and whoever else was involved just learned we're still alive. Alara's blood ran cold. They'd won the battle. But the war was just beginning. They'd won the battle. But the war was just beginning. The figure had vanished into the crowd like smoke, leaving only the weight of their gaze behind. Elara stood on the council chamber steps, her new title still ringing in her ears. Lady Vance, senior advisor to the Lord Commander, while her instincts screamed that something was deeply wrong. "We need to move," Kael said quietly, his hand still on his sword hilt. "Now." They descended the steps surrounded by Gareth, Marcus, and Lysa, who'd materialized from the crowd with weapons ready. The cheering citizens pressed close, reaching out to touch Kael's sleeve, calling his name, shouting their gratitude. But Elara kept her eyes on the shadows, searching for the figure who'd been watching. Nothing. Whoever it was had gone to ground. Aldrich met them at the base of the steps with horses already saddled. "We need to get you somewhere secure. The council's assigned you quarters in the upper district, but it'll take an hour to get the residents ready for occupation." "Where are we going until then?" Elara asked. "The old Thornridge estate," Kael said. "It's been seized, but technically it's mine again as of an hour ago. And I know every entrance, exit, and hiding place in that building." They rode through the city, the crowds thinning as they moved from the lower districts into the wealthier quarters. The architecture changed, stone giving way to marble, cramped buildings replaced by estates with iron gates and manicured gardens. This was the Valdris that Elara had imagined from a distance, the city of wealth and power. It felt hollow. The Thornridge estate sat on a hill overlooking the eastern quarter, a sprawling manor of gray stone with towers at each corner and grounds that stretched for acres. It should have felt like a fortress. Instead, as they rode through the gates, Elara felt exposed. "Something's wrong," she said. Kael reined in his horse, his eyes scanning the courtyard. "What do you see?" "Nothing. That's the problem." Elara pointed to the stables, the gardens, the servants' quarters. "This place was just returned to you. There should be staff, council representatives, someone taking inventory, but it's empty." Lisa drew her crossbow. "She's right. No movement. No lights." "Ambush?" Marcus asked. "Maybe." Kael dismounted, drawing his sword. "Or a message. Everyone inside, watch formation." They moved into the manor as a unit, Gareth taking point, Lysa covering the rear. The entrance hall was vast. Marble floors, a sweeping staircase, portraits of Thornridge ancestors lining the walls. Dust covered everything. The air smelled stale, abandoned, but Elara's architect's eye caught something else. "The floor's been disturbed, recently. Someone's been through here." Kael knelt, examining the faint marks in the dust. "You're right, multiple people, within the last few hours." He stood, his expression grim. "Split up. Check every room. If you find anything at all, call out. Don't engage alone." They fanned out through the manor, moving in pairs. Elara stayed with Kael, her knife drawn, her pulse hammering. They checked the drawing room, empty. The dining hall, empty. The library. Kael stopped so abruptly that Elara almost ran into him. The library was a wreck. Books pulled from shelves, furniture overturned, papers scattered across the floor. Someone had torn the room apart looking for something. "What were they after?" Elara asked. Kael crossed to the fireplace and pressed on a stone in the mantel. A section of the wall swung open, revealing a small hidden compartment. It was empty. "Backup documents," Kael said, his voice flat. "Copies of everything I gave the council, plus evidence on the other conspirators. I hid them here before I went to the border." He slammed his fist against the stone. "Whoever was working with Blackthorn knew about this. They've taken everything." "Then they know you didn't show the council all your cards," Elara said. "And now they have them." A shout echoed from upstairs, Gareth's voice sharp with alarm. They ran. Gareth stood in what looked like a study, his face pale, staring at something on the desk. Marcus and Lysa flanked him, weapons drawn. Elara pushed past them and froze. A body lay slumped over the desk. A man in council robes, his throat cut, blood pooling beneath him. Pinned to his chest was a note written in hasty script. Kael pulled the note free and read aloud. "You took Blackthorn. We take everything else. Every name you know, every ally you have, every piece of evidence, gone. Walk away now, or join him in the grave. You have 3 days." The note was unsigned. "Who is he?" Elara asked, her voice barely steady. Kael turned the body slightly, revealing the man's face. His expression went cold. Counselor Harrow. He sat on the investigation committee. He was the one who pushed hardest for Blackthorn's conviction. They killed him as a warning, Lisa said. Not just a warning, Alara corrected, her mind racing. A declaration. They're telling us they can reach anyone, that no one's safe. She looked at Kael. Who else was on that committee? 5 people total. Harrow, Counselor Vera, Magistrate Lorne, Captain Oren, and... Kael's face went white. And Aldrich. He was called to testify. They bolted from the room. Aldrich was in the courtyard, checking the horses, when they burst through the manor doors shouting his name. He spun, hand going to his sword. What? Get inside, Kael barked. Now! They hauled him into the entrance hall and barred the doors. Kael explained rapidly, the body, the note, the threat against everyone involved in the investigation. Aldrich's face darkened. Then we need to get to the others. If Harrow's dead, they'll target the rest. We split up, Kael said. Marcus, Lysa, you get Counselor Vera. She lives on the western terrace. Gareth, Aldrich, find Magistrate Lorne. He has a residence near the courts. I'll go after Captain Oren. He's stationed at the North Garrison. What about me? Alara asked. Kael hesitated. You stay here. You're not trained for... I'm not staying in a manor with a corpse while you all run into danger, Alara snapped. I'm coming with you. Alara, I've saved your life twice, survived an ambush, broke into the council chamber, and convinced 12 politicians to listen to reason. I can handle myself. She met his eyes. We're wasting time. Kael stared at her for a beat, then nodded. Fine, but you stay behind me. Always. They moved out in 3 teams, riding hard through the city as dusk fell. Kael and Alara headed north, the streets growing emptier as they left the wealthy districts behind. The North Garrison was a squat, functional building surrounded by high walls, more prison than barracks. Oren's a good man, Kael said as they dismounted. Fought with me on the border for 3 years. If anyone can hold out against an attack, it's him. They approached the gates. The guards recognized Kael immediately and let them through without question. Inside, the garrison was alive with activity. Soldiers training, weapons being sharpened, orders being shouted. Captain Oren was in the training yard, overseeing a squad running drills. He was a compact man, built like a brawler, his face scarred from years of close combat. When he saw Kael, he crossed the yard in long strides. Lord Commander, he said, gripping Kael's forearm, I heard what happened at the council. Glad to see you alive. I wish I was here just to thank you, Kael said, but we have a problem. He explained quickly, Harrow's murder, the note, the threat. Oren's expression went from concern to cold rage. So they're cleaning house, trying to bury the evidence by burying the witnesses. Yes, and you're on the list. Then let them come. Oren gestured to the garrison around them. I've got 200 soldiers here, all loyal, all trained. If someone wants me dead, they'll have to go through all of them. That might not be enough, Alara said. Both men looked at her. She pointed to the walls. This garrison was built to keep people in, not out. The walls are high, but the gates are the weak point. And if they're smart, they won't attack head-on. They'll use infiltration, poison, fire, something that bypasses your strength. Oren studied her. And you are? Someone who thinks about how buildings fail, Alara said. You need to lock down the water supply, post guards on the kitchen, and put sentries on the walls watching inward, not outward. If I wanted to kill everyone in this garrison, I wouldn't storm the gates. I'd burn it from the inside. Oren's eyes widened slightly. Then he turned and started shouting orders. Within minutes, the garrison shifted from routine to high alert. Soldiers moved to secure the wells, the kitchens, the supply rooms. Sentries doubled on every wall. Kael looked at Alara with something like awe. You just turned a garrison into a fortress in under 5 minutes. It's just problem solving, Alara said. But her hands were shaking, the weight of what she'd just done, the lives depending on her being right, pressed down on her chest. They stayed at the garrison until nightfall, helping Oren coordinate the defense. By the time they left, the place was locked down tighter than the council chamber. 2 down, Kael said as they rode back toward the city center. Let's hope the others had the same luck. They met at a safe house Aldrich had arranged, a nondescript building in the craftsman's quarter, far from the eyes of the upper districts. Marcus and Lysa arrived first, grim-faced. "Vera's dead," Lysa said without preamble. "We got there 10 minutes too late. Poison in her evening tea. The servants didn't even know until she collapsed." Alara's stomach dropped. "And Magistrate Lorne?" Gareth and Aldrich entered, supporting an older man between them. Lorne was pale, breathing hard, his robes torn and blood-stained. "Found him fighting off 2 assassins in his study," Gareth said. "We got there just in time." Lorne collapsed into a chair, his hands shaking. "They knew my routine, knew exactly when I'd be alone. If you hadn't arrived," he looked at Kyle. "They're not just cleaning up, they're erasing everyone who testified." "Then we make sure they can't finish the job," Kyle said. He turned to the group. "We have 3 people left alive who can corroborate the evidence against Blackthorn's network: Oren, Lorne, and Aldrich. We need to protect them until the council can act." "The council's compromised," Alara said. Everyone looked at her. She continued, her voice steady despite the fear. "Think about it. Hera was killed in your family estate, which was supposedly secured by the council. Vera was poisoned in her own home, which has council guards. These aren't random attacks. Someone inside is feeding them information." "Then who do we trust?" Marcus asked. "No one," Kyle said. "We go to ground. We protect the witnesses ourselves, and we find out who's behind this before they kill everyone who knows the truth." They spent the next 2 days in the safe house, moving only when necessary, trusting no one outside their small group. Alara threw herself into the problem like it was a construction project, mapping out relationships between council members, tracking who benefited from Blackthorn's deals, identifying weak points in the conspiracy. She worked late into the night, surrounded by documents and maps, her mind moving faster than her hands could write. Kyle watched her from across the room, his expression unreadable. "You don't have to do this," he said finally. Alara didn't look up. "Yes, I do." "Why?" "You could walk away, take the title, the position, and build a quiet life somewhere safe. You don't owe me anything." "This isn't about owing you." Alara set down her pen and met his eyes. 6 months ago, I was invisible, erased, thrown away by everyone I thought mattered. I convinced myself I didn't need anything or anyone. She gestured to the papers around her. But this, solving this, stopping them, making sure people like Harrow and Vera didn't die for nothing, this matters. I matter, and I'm not going back to being invisible. Kyle crossed the room and sat beside her. "You were never invisible. You just couldn't see yourself clearly." Something tightened in Alara's chest. She looked at this man, this soldier who'd trusted her when she'd given him every reason not to, who'd fought beside her, who'd made her believe she could be more than her worst moments. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing me when no one else did." Kale held her gaze. "I told you once, anger that moves becomes power. You've proven it. You're not the woman who ran to the forest anymore. You're the woman who changed a kingdom." Before Alara could respond, the door burst open. Lisa stood there, her face flushed from running. "We found something. You need to see this now." They followed her to the back room where Marcus had set up a makeshift intelligence center. He'd been tracking movements around the city, paying street informants for information about Blackthorn's known associates. "One name kept coming up," Marcus said, pointing to his notes. "Lady Saris Vane. She's a minor noble, no official council position, but she hosted every major political gathering for the last 3 years. Blackthorn attended all of them." "That's not unusual," Aldrich said. "Vane's parties are where half the city's deals get made." "But look at this." Marcus laid out a series of dates. Every time Blackthorn made a payment to enemy commanders, Vane hosted an event within 3 days. Every time a border raid happened, there was a gathering at her estate the week before. She's not just connected, she's the hub. Alara's pulse quickened. "She's the broker. Blackthorn was the public face, but Vane was running the network. She's the one who brought buyers and sellers together." "And she's still out there," Kyle said grimly. "Still operating. That's who sent the figure to watch us at the council. That's who's coordinating the assassinations." "Then we take her down," Gareth said. "It's not that simple," Alara said. "Vane's not a soldier or a politician. She's a socialite. Going after her directly without proof makes us look like we're hunting innocents. We need to catch her in the act." "How?" Lisa asked. Alara thought for a moment, her mind turning over the problem. Then it clicked. "We bait her. Vane's entire operation depends on information, knowing who's vulnerable, who's valuable, who's a threat. So we feed her information she can't resist, something that makes her expose herself." Kale leaned forward. "What kind of information?" "We let it leak that Magistrate Lorne has evidence hidden, documents that prove who else was involved in the conspiracy, documents that could bring down everyone in Vane's network." Alara's eyes gleamed. "We make her come after him." "You're talking about using Lorne as bait," Aldrich said slowly. "With his consent, and with us watching every move." Alara looked at Kyle. "If Vane takes the bait, she'll send people to retrieve the documents or kill Lorne. Either way, we catch them in the act, we get proof, and we end this." Kale studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled, a fierce, approving smile. "You're not just dangerous, you're terrifying." "I learned from the best," Alara said. They brought the plan to Lorne, who agreed immediately despite the risks. "If it stops them from killing anyone else," he said, "I'll do whatever it takes." They spent a day spreading carefully crafted rumors through the city, whispers in taverns, hints dropped to merchants known to gossip with nobles, anonymous notes left where Vane's people would find them. The story was simple. Magistrate Lorne had secured additional evidence proving the full extent of the conspiracy, hidden in a location known only to him. He would present it to the council in 3 days unless someone stopped him first. Then they waited. Lorne returned to his residence under guard, but it was a skeleton crew, intentionally weak, designed to look like overconfidence rather than a trap. Meanwhile, Kyle, Alara, and the others positioned themselves in the surrounding buildings, watching every entrance, every shadow. The attack came on the second night. Alara was stationed on a rooftop across from Lorne's residence when she saw movement, 3 figures in dark clothing scaling the garden wall with practiced ease. They moved like professionals, avoiding the guard's sightlines, heading straight for a side entrance. "Contact," she whispered into the speaking tube they'd rigged between positions. 3 targets, east side." "I see them," Kale's voice came back. "Hold position. Let them get inside." Alara watched as the figures picked the lock and slipped into the residence. Her heart hammered. This was it. If Vane had sent them, this was the proof they needed. Minutes passed. Then the front door burst open and the guards rushed inside, swords drawn. Sounds of fighting echoed across the courtyard. Steel on steel. Shouts. A scream cut short. Kale and Gareth stormed through the front entrance. Lysa and Marcus came through the back. Alara climbed down from the roof and ran across the street, her knife drawn. Inside, chaos. 2 of the assassins lay dead. The third was pinned against a wall by Gareth, his arm twisted behind his back, his face bleeding. "Who sent you?" Kyle demanded. The assassin spat blood. "Go to hell!" "You're already there," Kyle said. "The only question is whether you die here or in front of the council. Talk, and you might live long enough to see daylight." The assassin's eyes flickered, fear breaking through training. "Lady Vane, she sent us, said Lorne had documents that would destroy everything. We were supposed to retrieve them or kill him trying." "There it is," Alara said. "Proof." Kale turned to Aldrich. "Get this to the council, all of it, the assassin, his testimony, everything. Demand they arrest Vane immediately." "On it," Aldrich said, already moving, but as he reached the door it exploded inward. A dozen armed soldiers poured into the residence, led by a woman in elaborate silk robes embroidered with silver thread. She was tall, elegant, with sharp features and cold, calculating eyes. Lady Saris Vane. "How disappointing," she said, her voice smooth as glass. "I'd hoped you'd be smarter than this, Lord Commander. Walking into a trap is beneath you." Kale's hand went to his sword. "This is your trap. You're surrounded by witnesses and evidence. It's over." "Is it?" Vane gestured, and her soldiers fanned out, weapons drawn. They outnumbered Kyle's group 2 to 1. "I think you'll find the council will believe whatever story I tell them. After all, I'm the one who's been hosting their dinners, managing their secrets, keeping this city running while men like you play soldier." She smiled. "You were always too blunt for politics, Kale. That's why you lost." I haven't lost anything, Kyle said. Haven't you? Vane's eyes shifted to Alara. And who is this? The little nobody architect who thinks she can play in the real world? How charming. Alara felt rage flare in her chest, the same rage she'd felt standing in her bedroom 6 months ago, watching her sister destroy her life. But this time, it didn't paralyze her. It sharpened her. You're right, Alara said, stepping forward. I'm nobody. I don't have a title that matters, or wealth, or generations of breeding, but I have something you don't. And what's that? Vane asked, amused. I've already lost everything. Alara's voice went cold. Which means I have nothing left to lose, and that makes me a lot more dangerous than you think. She moved faster than Vane expected, closing the distance and pressing her knife to the woman's throat before the soldiers could react. Tell them to drop their weapons, Alara said quietly. Now! Vane's eyes widened, shock, then fury, then something like fear. You wouldn't dare. I dragged a dying man through miles of forest, fought off trained killers, and walked into the council chamber knowing I could die. Alara's hand was steady. Try me. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Vane raised her hand slightly. Stand down. The soldiers hesitated, then lowered their weapons. Good choice, Alara said. She didn't move the knife. Now you're going to walk out of here with us. You're going to go before the council, and you're going to tell them everything. And if I refuse? Then I prove I'm as dangerous as I said. Alara met her eyes. Your move. Vane stared at her, and for the first time, Alara saw genuine fear in those cold eyes. This woman who'd built an empire on manipulation and control was realizing she'd miscalculated. She'd underestimated the woman with nothing left to lose. Fine, Vane said through gritted teeth. I'll talk. They walked her out of the residence with her own soldiers watching in stunned silence. By dawn, she was in council custody, her network exposed, her power shattered. The council convened an emergency session. Vane, faced with overwhelming evidence and no allies left, confessed everything. The names, the deals, the murders. It took 8 hours, but by the time she finished, the entire conspiracy lay bare. 12 more arrests were made that day. Half of Blackthorn's network collapsed overnight. Alara stood in the council gallery, watching it all unfold, and felt something she hadn't felt in 6 months. Pride. Not in what others thought of her, but in what she'd become. After the session ended, Kyle found her on the steps outside. The city stretched below them, alive with the news of what had happened. You held a knife to a noble woman's throat, he said. I did. That was reckless. It was necessary. Kyle laughed, a real, genuine laugh. You've come a long way from the woman hiding in the forest. That woman saved your life, Alara reminded him. And this woman saved a kingdom. He looked at her seriously. The council wants to formally recognize your contributions. They're talking about land grants, positions, influence. You could have real power here. Alara thought about that. Power. 6 months ago, she'd have run from it. Now? What do you want? Kyle asked. I want to make sure this never happens again, Alara said. I want to build systems that can't be corrupted so easily. I want to use everything I learned as an architect to redesign how this city protects itself. She met his eyes. I want to matter. You already do, Kyle said. And for the first time in a long time, Alara believed it. You already do, Kyle said. And for the first time in a long time, Alara believed it. But belief and reality were different things. Standing on the council steps as the sun set over Valdris, Alara felt the weight of what came next pressing down on her shoulders. They'd exposed the conspiracy, arrested the traitors, shattered Vane's network. But destruction was easy. Building something better. That was the real test. What happens now? She asked. Kyle looked out over the city, his expression troubled. Now we find out how deep the rot goes. Vane gave us names, but names are just the beginning. Every position she compromised, every deal Blackthorn made, every system they corrupted, it all needs to be rebuilt from the ground up. He glanced at her. That's where you come in. Me? You're the architect, remember? You don't just see what's broken. You see what could be built in its place. His voice carried a weight that made her chest tighten. The council's convening in 3 days to discuss restructuring. They want you there, not as my advisor, as your own voice. Ilara's pulse quickened. They barely know who I am. They know enough. You held a knife to Lady Vane's throat and made her surrender without bloodshed. You identified the security flaws at the garrison that saved Captain Oren's life. You're the reason we caught them before they could bury the evidence completely. Kale's pale gray eyes held hers. You've earned your seat at that table. The question is whether you're willing to sit in it. Before Ilara could answer, rapid footsteps echoed behind them. Marcus appeared, his face flushed, a sealed letter in his hand. Lord Commander, he said, breathing hard. This just arrived. Courier said it was urgent. Kale broke the seal and read. His expression darkened with every line. What is it? Ilara asked. Border report. 3 villages hit by raiders in the last 48 hours. Coordinated attacks. Professional execution. He looked up, his jaw tight. They're testing us. Whoever's left of Blackthorn's network is making a move while we're distracted with arrests and trials. How many casualties? Aldrich asked, joining them on the steps. 43 dead. Over 100 displaced. The Eastern garrison sent reinforcements, but they're spread too thin. Without proper command structure, they're reacting instead of anticipating. Kale's hands clenched the letter. This is what happens when you rip out leadership without replacing it immediately. Chaos fills the void. Ilara's mind was already moving, turning the problem over like a blueprint. Then don't react. Anticipate. Kale looked at her. Explain. You said the attacks were coordinated. That means someone's still out there giving orders, someone with enough authority and knowledge to direct raids even with Vane in custody. Ilara's pulse quickened as the pieces connected, which means they're still using the same communication channels, the same routes, the same contacts. Oh, Vane already gave us the names of everyone in the network, Marcus said. Everyone she knew about, Ilara corrected. But what if there's someone above her, someone even she didn't have full access to? Someone who kept themselves insulated enough that even if the network collapsed, they could keep operating? Kale's eyes widened slightly. The architect of the conspiracy. Blackthorn was the face. Vane was the broker. But someone had to design the entire system in the first place. Exactly. Ilara turned to Marcus. Go through Vane's testimony again. Look for gaps, questions she avoided, names she mentioned once but never elaborated on. Someone protected themselves well enough that even she couldn't give them up. Marcus nodded and ran back inside. Aldrich crossed his arms. Even if you're right, finding someone that buried will take weeks, months. Meanwhile, people are dying at the border. Then we stop the bleeding first and find the source second, Kyle said. He turned to Aldrich. I need you to take command of the Eastern garrison. Rebuild the defense grid. Get the patrols back on schedule. Show them someone's in charge again. What about you? Aldrich asked. I'm going to the border myself. If there's still a mastermind out there, they'll make a mistake eventually. And when they do, I'll be there to catch them. Kyle looked at Ilara. I need you to stay here. Work with the council. Start rebuilding the systems we've broken. Make sure this city doesn't fall apart while we're gone. Ilara's stomach tightened. You're leaving. I have to. The border's my responsibility. It always has been. Then I'm coming with you. No. The word was flat, final. Ilara felt anger flare in her chest. You don't get to make that decision for me. You're needed here, Kale said, his voice softening. What we did, exposing the conspiracy, that was the easy part. Anyone with enough evidence and courage could have done that. But rebuilding, creating systems that actually work, that protect people instead of exploiting them, that takes your mind, your vision. The council needs that. This city needs that. He stepped closer. I need you to do this, please. Ilara wanted to argue, wanted to tell him she hadn't survived this long just to be left behind while he rode into danger. But she saw the truth in his eyes. This wasn't about protection or control. This was about trust. He was trusting her with something more important than fighting. He was trusting her with the future. Fine, she said, but you come back alive. That's non-negotiable. Kale smiled. Deal. He left at dawn with Aldrich, Gareth, and a squad of loyal soldiers. Ilara stood at the city gates and watched them ride east until they disappeared into the morning mist. Then she turned back toward the council chamber and got to work. The next 3 days were a blur of meetings, arguments, and late nights surrounded by documents. The council had invited her to participate in the restructuring discussions, but invited was generous. Half the council members resented her presence, a commoner with no formal education in governance, no noble blood, no right to speak on matters of state. Councillor Thane made that clear within the first hour. "With all due respect, Lady Vance," he said, his tone dripping condescension, "you may have helped expose the conspiracy, but that doesn't qualify you to redesign our entire government structure. These are complex issues requiring years of study and experience." Alara met his gaze calmly. "You're right. I haven't spent years studying governance, but I have spent years studying how systems fail, how buildings collapse when their foundations are flawed, how infrastructure breaks down when it's not maintained, and everything I've seen in this city tells me your foundations are cracked." "That's insulting," Thane snapped. "It's accurate," Alara said. "You had a Lord Commander selling border positions, a council member coordinating with enemy forces, a noblewoman running an assassination network under your noses for years. That's not bad luck. That's systemic failure." She stood, moving to the map of Valdris that dominated one wall. "Your problem isn't that you had corrupt people in power. Your problem is that your system makes corruption easy and exposure hard." "And you think you can fix that?" another council member asked, his voice skeptical. "I think I can try," Alara said, "starting with transparency." She spent the next hour laying out proposals that made half the council shift uncomfortably in their seats. Public records of all council votes, open hearings for major decisions, independent oversight committees with rotating membership to prevent capture, mandatory financial disclosures for anyone holding office, whistleblower protections, term limits. "You're describing a complete overhaul," Thane said, his face red. "This would strip the council of its authority." "No," Alara corrected. "It would strip the council of its secrecy. There's a difference. Authority that can't withstand scrutiny isn't authority. It's tyranny." The room erupted in argument, but Alara noticed something. Several council members weren't arguing. They were listening, nodding, taking notes. After the session ended, one of them approached her, Councillor Mira Ashton, a woman in her 50s who'd been quietly supportive throughout. "You made enemies today," Mira said. "I know." "Good. That means you're doing something right." Mira smiled slightly. "I've been on this council for 12 years. I've watched it rot from the inside while people like Thane protected their interests and called it tradition. What you're proposing, it's radical, dangerous, and absolutely necessary." "Will it pass?" Alara asked. "Not all of it. Not immediately. But you've started a conversation that's been avoided for too long." Mira's expression sobered. "Just be careful. The people who benefited from the old system won't let it die without a fight, and some of them are still sitting in this room." That night, Alara returned to the quarters the council had assigned her, a modest suite in a building near the chamber, comfortable but not extravagant. She collapsed into a chair, exhausted, and closed her eyes. A knock at the door made them snap open. She opened it to find Lysa standing there, her expression grim. "We found something," Lisa said. "You need to see it now." Alara followed her through the quiet streets to the safe house where Marcus had been analyzing Vane's testimony. He had documents spread across every surface, strings connecting names and dates like a spider's web. "There," Marcus said, pointing to a series of entries. "Vane mentioned someone called the Architect 3 times in her testimony. She always caught herself immediately after and redirected. But it's there. A title, not a name." Alara's skin went cold. "The Architect." "It fits," Lisa said. "Someone who designed the entire conspiracy. Someone smart enough to stay hidden even when everyone else fell." "Did Vane give any details?" Alara asked. "Nothing concrete, but look at this." Marcus pointed to another document, a financial record seized from Vane's estate. Every major payment in the conspiracy went through a holding company called Stonefell Enterprises. No listed owner, no physical address, just a name and a series of transactions. "Can we trace it?" "We've been trying. The trail goes cold at a banking house in the merchant district. They're claiming confidentiality protections." Marcus looked frustrated. "Without council authority to break those protections, we're stuck." Alara thought for a moment. Then she smiled. "We don't need council authority. We need leverage." The next morning, Alara walked into the offices of the banking house with Lisa and a small squad of city guards. The manager, a thin man with nervous hands, tried to block her. "I'm sorry, Lady Vance, but client confidentiality is sacred. We cannot simply—" "You can," Alara interrupted, "because the account in question is directly linked to a conspiracy that killed over 50 people and destabilized the entire realm, which means it's evidence in an ongoing investigation, which means if you obstruct access, you become complicit in treason." She leaned forward. "How sacred is confidentiality compared to your life?" The manager went pale. I would need to consult." "You have 10 seconds to open that vault, or I have these guards arrest you, and we open it ourselves." Alara's voice was ice. "Choose." He chose the vault. 20 minutes later, they had the records, and the name behind Stonefell Enterprises made Alara's blood run cold. Counselor Thane, the man who'd opposed her proposals most viciously. The man who'd sat in the chamber arguing for tradition and stability while secretly funding the conspiracy that nearly destroyed the realm. "We need to move fast," Lisa said as they left the banking house. "If Thane finds out we have this—" "He'll run or destroy evidence," Alara finished. "We go to the council. Now." They burst into an emergency session 30 minutes later, Alara carrying the documents like weapons. The council members looked up in shock as she strode to the center of the chamber. "Counselor Thane," she said, her voice ringing through the space. "You are under arrest for conspiracy, treason, and murder." Thane shot to his feet, his face a mask of outrage. "This is absurd! I am a senior member of this council. You cannot—" "I can." Alara slammed the documents onto the table. "Stonefell Enterprises, a shell company used to fund Blackthorn's network. The account holder? You. Every payment, every transaction, every bribe, it all traces back to you." She looked around at the other council members. Blackthorn was the face. Vane was the broker. But Thane was the architect. He designed the entire system. He profited from it, and when it started to collapse, he stayed silent and let others take the fall. Thane's face went white, then red. "Those records are forged. She's fabricated. The banking house will testify under oath," Alara said. "The financial trail is undeniable, and if we dig deeper, I guarantee we'll find more." She stepped closer to him. "You called me unqualified, inexperienced, a nobody who didn't understand how things work. You were right about one thing. I don't understand how your system works, because your system was built on corruption, and I'm here to tear it down." Guards moved in before Thane could respond. He struggled, shouting denials and threats, but within minutes he was in chains and being dragged from the chamber. The remaining council members sat in stunned silence. Finally, Councillor Mira spoke. "Lady Vance, do you have evidence linking anyone else in this chamber to the conspiracy?" Alara looked around the room. Several members couldn't meet her eyes. "Not yet, but I will if it's there." "Then I move that we implement Lady Vance's transparency reforms immediately," Mira said. "All of them, no exceptions. If we're going to rebuild trust, it starts now." One by one, the council members voted, some reluctantly, some with visible relief. The reforms passed unanimously. Alara walked out of the chamber feeling like she'd just fought a battle without weapons. Her hands were shaking, her legs felt weak. But she'd won. A message arrived that evening. Kale's handwriting, brief and direct. "Border secured, raiders scattered. Found evidence of Thane's involvement here too. Well done. Coming home." Alara read it 3 times, feeling something warm unfold in her chest. He was coming home, and when he did, they'd have something real to show him, a city beginning to heal. But healing wasn't the same as healed. Over the next 2 weeks, Alara threw herself into the work of rebuilding. She helped design new oversight protocols. She interviewed candidates for positions left vacant by arrests. She worked with architects, real ones this time, to improve infrastructure in the lower districts, places that had been neglected for decades. And people began to notice. Merchants who'd lost everything to corrupt officials came to her with grievances. She helped them navigate the new system, recover stolen property, get justice. Soldiers who'd been unjustly discharged sought her advocacy. She reviewed their cases, reinstated those who deserved it, and held accountable those who didn't. Word spread. The woman who'd held a knife to Lady Vane's throat, the architect who'd exposed Thane, the voice that had demanded change and actually made it happen. Elara Vance was becoming a name people knew. One afternoon, as she was leaving the council chamber, a woman stopped her in the street. "Lady Vance," the woman said, her voice trembling, "I wanted to thank you. My husband was a soldier under Lord Thornridge. He was arrested when Blackthorn declared the Lord Commander a traitor. We thought he'd die in prison, but you helped get him released. He came home yesterday." Elara felt her throat tighten. "I'm glad. You gave us our life back." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." After she left, Elara stood in the street, people flowing around her, and felt something shift inside her chest. This was what mattered. Not titles or recognition, not revenge or vindication. This, helping people rebuild what had been stolen from them. Kale returned 3 weeks after leaving, riding through the city gates at the head of a column of soldiers. Elara was waiting for him, and when their eyes met across the courtyard, something passed between them that didn't need words. He dismounted and crossed to her in long strides. "You've been busy." "So have you." Elara gestured to the soldiers. "The border?" "Stabilized. The raiders are gone or dead. We found the last of Thane's contacts and shut them down." Kale's expression darkened. "But it was close. If you hadn't found Thane when you did, he would have had time to destroy the evidence and disappear. You saved more lives than you know." "We saved them," Elara corrected. "All of us." Kale smiled. "Fair." He looked around at the city. "What else did I miss?" Elara told him everything: the reforms, the trials, the rebuilding, the small victories, and the larger changes. Kale listened without interrupting, and when she finished, he looked at her with something like awe. "You didn't just hold the city together," he said. "You made it better." "I had help." "You always say that. But the ideas were yours. The vision was yours." He stepped closer. "You've become what you were always meant to be." "And what's that?" Elara asked. "Someone who changes the world instead of hiding from it." Before Elara could respond, a commotion erupted near the gates. She turned to see a carriage rolling into the courtyard, an expensive one, marked with a family crest she recognized immediately. Her heart sank. The Vance family crest. Her family. The carriage door opened and her mother stepped out, followed by her sister Celeste, and Elara's stomach twisted. Marcus Holden, the man who'd betrayed her. They looked exactly as she remembered. Her mother, elegant and cold. Celeste, beautiful and calculating. Marcus, confident and hollow. They saw her and crossed the courtyard with practiced smiles. "Elara," her mother said, as if they'd parted on good terms. "We've been trying to reach you for weeks. We heard about your accomplishments. We're so proud." Elara stared at her. "You disowned me. You chose her." She pointed at Celeste. "You told me I was difficult, that I was the problem." "We were upset," her mother said smoothly. "We didn't understand, but now we see how wrong we were. You've made something of yourself. You've risen above it all, and we want to be part of your life again." "Part of my life," Elara repeated slowly. "Or part of my success?" Her mother's smile faltered. "That's unfair." "Is it?" Elara looked at Celeste, who hadn't said a word. "What about you? Do you have anything to say?" Celeste's expression was carefully neutral. "I'm sorry for everything. I made a mistake. We both did." She glanced at Marcus. "We're not together anymore. It didn't work out. And now you want me to forgive you," Elara said. "We're family," her mother said. "Surely that means something." Elara felt Kale's presence at her shoulder, a silent support, ready to intervene if needed, but she didn't need him to fight this battle. "You're right," she said quietly. "Family means something. It means showing up when things are hard. It means believing in someone even when they fail. It means not throwing people away when they stop being useful." She met her mother's eyes. "You taught me what family isn't, and for that, I'm actually grateful, because it showed me what I didn't want to become." Her mother's face hardened. "So you're going to reject us? After everything I'm not rejecting you," Elara interrupted. "I'm just not letting you back in. There's a difference. You wanted me gone and I left. You wanted me to disappear and I did. But I built something better without you, and I don't need your approval anymore." She stepped back. "Go home," Live your lives. But don't expect me to pretend the last 6 months didn't happen. Her mother opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time, she looked uncertain. Celeste finally spoke, her voice small. I really am sorry, Alara. I know, Alara said, and she meant it. But sorry doesn't change what happened. It just means you finally understand what you did. They left without another word. Alara watched the carriage roll away and felt nothing but relief. That was harder than facing the council, she said. Probably, Kael agreed. But you handled it perfectly. Did I? You chose strength over bitterness, clarity over anger. That's what real power looks like. He turned to face her. You've proven something, Alara. Not to them. Not to the council. To yourself. You're not the woman who ran to the forest anymore. You're not the woman who let others define her worth. Then who am I? Alara asked. The woman who saved a kingdom and decided what came next. Kael's pale eyes held hers. The woman who's about to help me rebuild an entire realm, if you want the job. Alara's breath caught. What are you asking? The council's offered me the position of Lord Protector until a new governance structure is established. It's temporary, but it means overseeing the entire transition, making sure the reforms we've started actually take root. He paused. I said yes, but only if you work beside me, not under me, beside me, equal authority, equal voice. Kael, you're the reason any of this is possible, he said. You saw what was broken and figured out how to fix it. You brought people together. You made them believe change was possible. His expression softened. I can fight wars, but you can build peace, and peace is what this realm needs now. Alara looked at him. This man who'd been a stranger dying beneath a waterfall, who'd become an ally, a partner, something more than she had words for. Yes, she said. Kael smiled. Then let's get to work. The transition took months. There were setbacks, arguments, moments when the whole structure felt like it might collapse. But slowly, steadily, the changes took hold. The council became transparent. The border stabilized. Trade routes reopened. Villages that had been abandoned began to rebuild. The city guard was reformed with oversight and accountability. The lower districts received funding for infrastructure. Corruption didn't disappear, it never would, but it became harder to hide, easier to punish. And through it all, Alara worked beside Kael, her voice carrying weight in every decision, her vision shaping the future of the realm. People began calling her Lady Protector, even though it wasn't an official title. She didn't correct them. 6 months after Thane's arrest, the council held a formal ceremony to mark the completion of the initial reforms. It was held in the Great Plaza, open to the public, a symbol of the transparency they'd fought for. Alara stood on the platform beside Kael, looking out at the crowd, thousands of people who'd come to witness the moment. She saw merchants and soldiers, nobles and laborers, all of them gathered together. She saw the future. Kael spoke first, his voice carrying across the plaza. He talked about sacrifice, about the people who died exposing the conspiracy, about the work still ahead. He thanked the council, the soldiers, the citizens who'd believed change was possible. Then he turned to Alara. But none of this would have happened without one person. She wasn't born into power. She didn't seek recognition. She was someone who'd lost everything and had every reason to stay hidden, but she chose to step forward anyway. She chose to fight, and because of her, everything changed. The crowd erupted in applause. Alara felt her throat tighten. She stepped forward to the edge of the platform, looking out at all those faces, and for a moment she saw herself 6 months ago, broken, alone, convinced she didn't matter. That woman felt like a stranger now. She spoke without notes, her voice steady. I'm not a soldier or a politician. I'm just someone who got tired of feeling powerless, tired of watching systems fail and being told there was nothing I could do about it. So I decided to do something, and I learned that power isn't something you're born with, it's something you build. One choice at a time, one stand at a time, one moment where you decide that the world doesn't get to make you small. She paused. We've rebuilt a lot in the past months, but the real work is just beginning, because systems are only as strong as the people who maintain them. So this isn't just our victory, it's yours, and it's your responsibility to make sure it lasts. The applause this time was thunderous. As the ceremony ended and the crowd dispersed, Alara walked through the plaza with Kael, both of them surrounded by guards, but feeling, for the first time in months, like they could breathe. "What happens now?" Elara asked. "We keep building," Kael said. "Keep fixing what's broken. Keep proving that this can work." "That's not much of a plan." "It's the only one we have." He glanced at her. "Unless you have something better." Elara thought about the woman who'd walked into the forest 6 months ago. The woman who'd been abandoned, betrayed, erased. The woman who'd chosen silence because the world had proven too cruel to face. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone who'd learned that survival wasn't enough, that hiding wasn't safety, that true power came from choosing to matter even when everything told you that you didn't. "I have one idea," Elara said. "What's that?" She looked at Kael, the man she'd saved, the partner she'd fought beside, the reason she'd stopped running and started building. "We make sure no one else has to feel the way I did," she said. "We build a world where people don't have to lose everything to find out what they're capable of, where power isn't about crushing others, where strength means lifting people up instead of tearing them down." Kael studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled. "That's a much better plan." "I know." They walked through the city together as the sun set, casting long shadows across the cobblestones. Around them, Valdris was alive, markets closing, taverns opening, families heading home. It was imperfect, messy, still healing from deep wounds, but it was healing. And Elara Vance, the woman who'd been nothing, who'd lost everything, who'd chosen to save a dying man beneath a waterfall and change the course of a kingdom, walked through it knowing she'd found something she'd thought was gone forever. Purpose. Belonging. Power. Not the power to control or dominate, the power to build, to protect, to matter. She'd started as a woman with nothing left to lose. She'd become the reason everything changed. And as the stars began to appear above the city, Elara looked up at them and felt for the first time in her entire life like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The story of the woman who'd lost everything and found herself in the process wasn't over. It was just beginning. Elara stood at the window of her new office, a room in the eastern tower of the council building that overlooked both the upper and lower districts. It was late, well past midnight, but sleep felt impossible. Too much had happened. Too much had changed. A knock at the door broke her thoughts. "Come in," she said without turning. Kael entered, carrying 2 cups of wine. He handed her one and stood beside her at the window, both of them looking out at the sleeping city. "You should rest," he said. "Tomorrow starts early." "So does every day now." Elara took a sip, the wine warm and bitter. "I keep thinking about what you said, about this being just the beginning." "Having second thoughts?" "No, just realizing how big it actually is. We've changed laws, exposed traitors, restructured the council. But changing how people think, how they see power, and who deserves it, that's going to take years, maybe decades." "Probably," Kael agreed. "But you've already started it. People see you differently than they see other nobles. You earned your position through action, not birthright. That matters." Elara set down her cup and turned to face him fully. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Why did you really recommend me for equal authority? You could have kept me as an advisor, given me influence without actual power. It would have been easier to manage." Kael was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "Because I've spent my entire life watching power corrupt people, watching them start with good intentions and end up becoming exactly what they fought against. But you—" He met her eyes. "You had power over Vane. You could have killed her, made an example, gotten revenge for every injustice you'd suffered. Instead, you chose justice. You chose the harder path because it was the right one." He paused. "That's not something that can be taught. It's who you are. And that's exactly the kind of person who should have power." Elara felt something tighten in her chest. Gratitude and something deeper, something she wasn't quite ready to name. "I couldn't have done any of this without you," she said quietly. "Yes, you could have. You just didn't know it yet." Kael smiled. "I was just the excuse you needed to stop hiding." Before Elara could respond, a commotion erupted from the street below. Shouting, the clatter of boots on stone. They both moved to the window. A crowd was gathering in the plaza. Not threatening, but urgent. People carrying torches, calling out for Lady Vance and Lord Thornridge. "What now?" Alara muttered, already heading for the door. They descended the tower stairs quickly, guards falling in behind them. By the time they reached the plaza, the crowd had grown to nearly 100 people. A woman pushed forward, middle-aged, her clothes worn but clean, her face determined. "Lady Vance," she said, slightly breathless, "we need your help. The Trade Guild is trying to reinstate the old tariff laws, the ones that made it impossible for small merchants to compete. They're pressuring the council to vote tomorrow before anyone notices." Alara's blood went cold. "Which council members?" "Councillor Drake and 3 others. They're calling it economic stability, but it's the same corruption with a new name." Kale's jaw tightened. "We just cleaned house. They're already testing how far they can push." "Then we push back," Alara said. She turned to the woman. "What do you need?" "Proof that the old laws were designed to benefit guild leadership at everyone else's expense. Documentation that shows the pattern. If we have that, we can challenge the vote publicly." "Where would we find that proof?" "The guild keeps records in their headquarters, but they're locked down tight. No public access." Alara exchanged a glance with Kyle. "How tight?" "Guards. Multiple locks. They'll never let us in willingly." "Then we don't ask for permission," Alara said. She looked at the crowd. "How many of you are willing to stand witness if we find the evidence?" Every hand went up. "Good. Then let's go remind the guild what transparency actually means." They marched through the streets, Alara, Kyle, the woman, and 50 citizens carrying torches like weapons. The guild headquarters sat in the merchant district, a squat stone building that radiated prosperity and exclusivity. Alara walked straight to the front door and pounded on it. A guard opened it, his expression shifting from annoyance to alarm when he saw the crowd. "The guild is closed. Come back." "Open the records room," Alara said. "Now. I don't have authority to—" "I am Lady Protector Alara Vance, and I have authority granted by the High Council to investigate corruption in any institution. Open the records room or I'll have every person in this crowd testify that the guild obstructed a legal investigation." Her voice cut like steel. "Choose." The guard paled. He looked at Kyle, saw the Lord Commander's hand on his sword, and made the smart choice. "This way." They flooded into the building, citizens and soldiers together. The records room was exactly what Alara expected. Shelves of ledgers, contracts, correspondence. She assigned people to different sections, showing them what to look for: dates, amounts, names of council members receiving payments. Within an hour, they had everything they needed. Payments to Councillor Drake matching votes in his favor. Contracts that gave guild leadership exclusive trade rights while strangling competition. Letters discussing how to hide the arrangements from public scrutiny. It was Blackthorn's network in miniature. Different players, same corruption. "We present this tomorrow morning," Alara said, her voice carrying through the room. "Before the vote, in front of everyone." The woman who'd first approached her smiled, fierce and grateful. "You really did change things." "We all did," Alara corrected, "and we're going to keep changing them." The next morning, the council chamber was packed. Word had spread. Citizens filled the gallery, standing room only, all of them waiting to see what would happen. Councillor Drake looked confident as he presented his proposal: economic stability, protecting established businesses, ensuring steady trade. It sounded reasonable until you understood what it actually meant. Then Alara stood. "Councillor Drake," she said, her voice carrying, "before we vote, I have evidence the council should see." Drake's expression flickered, just for a moment, but Alara caught it. Fear. She presented the documents methodically. The payments, the exclusive contracts, the letters proving deliberate corruption. And she didn't just read them, she invited the citizens who'd helped find them to testify, giving faces and stories to the numbers. By the time she finished, the chamber was silent. Drake tried to argue, tried to claim the documents were taken illegally, that this was a witch hunt, that the guild had every right to protect its interests. But Councillor Mira shut him down. "The law is clear. Evidence of corruption obtained through lawful investigation is admissible, and Lady Vance had full authority to conduct that investigation." The vote wasn't even close. Drake's proposal was rejected unanimously, and Drake himself was removed from the council pending a full inquiry. The gallery erupted in cheers. Alara stood in the center of it, feeling the weight of what they'd just done. This wasn't just about stopping one corrupt vote. It was about proving that the new system actually worked, that citizens could challenge power and win. After the session, Kael found her on the steps again, the same place where everything had changed weeks ago. "You're making a habit of this," he said. "Of what?" "Terrifying corrupt officials and inspiring everyone else." He smiled. "It's a good look on you." Alara laughed, a real, unguarded laugh that felt like release. "I never planned any of this. 6 months ago, I just wanted to be left alone. And now? Now I want to make sure no one has to choose between hiding and surviving. I want to build something that lasts, something that actually protects people instead of exploiting them." She looked at him. "I want to matter, not for recognition, but because the work matters." "You already do," Kael said. "And you will, for as long as you choose to." Alara turned back to the city, watching people move through the streets below, merchants opening shops, workers heading to jobs, families living lives that felt safer today than they had yesterday. She'd lost everything once: her home, her family, her identity. She'd been abandoned, betrayed, told she didn't matter. And from that loss, she'd built something stronger than anything she'd had before. She'd built herself, not as someone else wanted her to be, but as who she truly was. The woman who'd saved a king, who'd exposed a conspiracy, who'd stood in front of power and demanded better. The woman who'd proven that survival wasn't just endurance, it was transformation. And as the sun climbed higher over Valdris, Alara Vance stood on those steps and knew with absolute certainty that this, all of this, was just the beginning. The kingdom had changed because she'd chosen to fight for it, and she wasn't done fighting yet.